can all do at least 5 or 6.
All right, everyone. Thanks for coming to Logan Hobbs Thesis Defense. Logan joins us from Eureka College, where he got his bachelor's in psychology. And he is an aficionado of running, coffee, breweries, and cats, in addition to his vast and deep expertise on effective forecasting, which he is about to share with you. So with that, I will turn it over to Logie.
Thank you. Woo, yeah. Wow, it's been 2 years, that's crazy. Thank you guys for coming. Today, I'm going to be presenting my thesis research, like Nicole said, on the roles of effective forecasting, environmental identity, and behavioral familiarity as they relate to decisions to engage in pro-environmental behaviors. Making sure it's working. It wasn't working on both screens earlier. Now that's good. As an introduction, so I think that we all are aware that human behavior does contribute significantly to global greenhouse gas emissions. A recent estimate stated that about 20% of GHG emissions yearly do come from the individual and household level. So our individual behaviors do contribute significantly to climate change. But the good news is that engaging in pro-environmental behaviors, or PEBs, is one way that we can kind of help lower our overall emissions. Higher environmental identity is one of the many well-studied antecedents to pro-environmental behavior engagement. Environmental identity is just generally the way that you engage with the natural world around us. And we also know that people constantly look to their forecasted future emotion to determine the present course of action. This is called effective forecasting, and we'll get into a little bit more later. So my thesis kind of looks at how these variables, along with behavioral familiarity, interact when someone considers engaging in a pro-environmental behavior. So we're going to start off with just a brief literature review of some of the key concepts. So environmental identity, to start off with, identities are formed through underlying values, attitudes, and beliefs, and they also can subsequently inform new values, attitudes, and beliefs. EID, just as a definition, describes a person's understanding of themselves as an integrated component of the natural environment. And because of that, it influences behaviors that are perceived by the person to be either environmentally relevant or have an environmental impact. EID is also strongly associated with increased PEB engagement, specifically long-term patterns of engagement. And this is because identity tends to be more stable over time. So it is more, thank you, it's more able to predict those sorts of long-term habits. Whereas things like nudges or social cues are better at predicting one-off behaviors like choosing a compostable coffee cup as opposed to styrofoam. Identities also assist in the formation of emotional reactions, and this gets into identity theory a little bit. So according to identity theory, negative effect is brought about when a person perceives themselves to be not acting in line with their own self-identity. So if I consider myself to be an environmentalist and I have a cup that I know is recyclable and I throw it in the garbage instead, that'll bring about a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. I'll feel bad about myself because I'm not acting consistently with how I view myself. Vice versa, positive affect arises when a person believes that they are acting in line with their self-identity. So again, if I'm an environmentalist and I recycle a recyclable cup, that'll make me feel prideful. It'll make me feel good because I'm acting in line with my identity. And these affective reactions can be brought about either prior to, during, or after a specific event or engaging in a behavior, which brings us to effective forecasting. So effective forecasts are just predictions that people make concerning how they anticipate to experience affect in specific future situations. So in the graph there, you can kind of see at time 0, you have a simulated and anticipated outcome or engagement in your mind. And when you're thinking about that future engagement, you have specific anticipated positive and negative feelings that you anticipate. And then there's someone on Zoom that scared me so much. And then at time 1, you have the actual experienced outcome or event. So when the thing actually happens, you will feel certain experienced emotions that can be either more or less similar to how you expected them to be. There are 4 main components of effective forecasting, and those are valence, so whether the affect will be positive or negative; intensity, how strong the affect will be; duration, how long the affect will stay around, and specificity, the specific emotions that you anticipate feeling. So because forecasts are often different than experiences, because none of us can predict the future with 100% certainty, there's normally error embedded within an effective forecast, which gets into effective forecasting error and effective forecasting accuracy, which we delve into in the second study. So both forecasted and experienced affects have been studied as antecedents to pro-environmental behavior engagement. But there is still some uncertainty regarding which may be a better predictor of future PEB engagement. So whether or not trying to elicit anticipated versus experienced affect is better at getting people to engage in PEBs. There's also some uncertainty regarding which valence of affect is better at encouraging PEB engagement. And in the past literature, most of it is pretty focused on the dichotomy of pride and guilt. So whether or not trying to elicit anticipated or experienced pride or anticipated versus experienced guilt is better, where we're still kind of unsure. It's likely very situationally dependent. And then finally, I mentioned that we are interested in the role of behavioral familiarity, which there hasn't been a whole lot of research on, especially as it affects effective forecasting accuracy. The past literature that does exist points to null effects of familiarity on accuracy in a few different contexts, including appraisals of cancer treatment side effects, work-related task engagement, and control. Specifically in these studies, though, they investigate forecasts for the completion of a behavior and not for actually engaging in a behavior itself, which is important because you're likely to feel different things while you're engaging in a tough behavior versus at the end of a tough behavior. So in our second study, it analyzes forecast and experiences for actually engaging in the behavior instead of asking people how they expect to feel or how they do feel at the end of a behavior. So with that in mind, we have 5 main objectives. We want to investigate the influence of environmental identity on effective forecasts for future PEBs. We want to determine whether positive effective forecasts mediate the relationship between EID and PEI. We want to examine whether higher EID is associated with an increase in AFA for PEB engagement. We want to explore whether increased familiarity also increases AFA for PEB engagement. And finally, we want to determine if familiarity mediates that relationship between EID and AFA. So to investigate these objectives, we conducted 2 studies. And the first study looks at primarily that top triangle there, the EID to PAF to PEI. So the first hypothesis is that higher environmental identity will result in an increase in positive effective forecast for PEBs. Higher environmental identity will also result in an increase in overall pro-environmental behavior intentions, which is a replication. This is something that has been demonstrated before. And finally, that positive effective forecast will mediate the relationship between environmental identity and pro-environmental behavioral intentions. So for an example of this, if you were asked to help plant a garden, this second hypothesis posits that as your environmental identity becomes higher, or if you already have a high environmental identity, you'll be more likely to forecast more positively for engaging in that planting of the garden, which will then make you more likely to actually engage in it in the end. So for this study, we sent out an online campus-wide survey completed by about 2,000 students. And this is kind of the survey flow. So as you can see, we had an environmental identity manipulation. We manipulated participants into high, low, and control groups. We call this independent variable manipulated EID. And then we also did 2 manipulation checks. One was right after the manipulation to make sure that the manipulation works as we intended it to. And then we also had one at the end to make sure that the manipulation held for the duration of the survey. We combined those 2 to create a mean composite that we call measured environmental identity. We also had participants effectively forecast for 10 different PEBs. And finally, we had them indicate their level of intention to engage in 14 different PEBs. So for our results, first, the manipulation, as you can kind of see from the table there, the manipulation checks did confirm that the manipulation worked as intended, as the high group has a higher measured EID than the low group. However, we didn't observe statistical differences between the groups for almost all of our dependent variables, including our main ones of positive effective forecast and PEI. This could be due to some skewed sampling. We conducted dropout analyses, and those participants who didn't complete the survey or had missing data did exhibit significantly lower environmental identity than those who were kept. So that's probably why we didn't see any differences in our DBs. So instead of investigating our results using the manipulated identity, we instead used the composite measured environmental identity. So for H1A, EID and positive effective forecast, we do see a significant positive relationship between those two, as well as a significant negative relationship between EID and NAS. So this means that as your environmental identity increases, your positive forecast for PEBs also increase, and your negative forecast decrease, which was as hypothesized. For H1B, our regression showed a significant positive relationship between EID and PEI, which again was a replication. So that hypothesis is also confirmed. And finally, for the mediation, we used process model 4 for this. All of the direct pathways were positive and significant. And then we also saw a significant indirect effect of positive effective forecast, meaning that as an environmental identity increases, is everything okay?
I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
The EID composite is like the individual difference measure of someone's environmental identity, or is the composite of the time 1 and time 2?
Composite of time 1 and time 2. So that was like going back to the survey flow, we measured it 2 times. It's just a mean of those two. Yeah. Yep. So this mediation just means as a person's EID becomes higher, they forecast more positively for future PEBs, which then results in an increase in intentions to actually engage in those PEBs. So that was study 1, which did not get into actually engaging in pro-environmental behaviors. So we just asked them for their intentions. And then we also didn't measure experience affects, so we couldn't kind of measure effective forecasting accuracy. So study 2 set out to also incorporate those concepts. So H3, forecast accuracy, will be predicted by environmental identity such that higher identity is associated with more accurate forecasting. People will forecast less positive affect for more familiar behaviors, and this is kind of based on the effect that novelty has. H4B, people will become more accurate in their effective forecasts for more familiar behaviors. And H5, familiarity, will mediate the relationship between environmental identity and forecast accuracy. So to investigate this, we did a 2-part study. In the first part, it was an online survey which assessed environmental identity, familiarity for 8 PEBs, as well as their effective forecast for those same PEBs. And then in part 2, participants actually came into the lab and engaged in 1 of 4 PEBs that were taken, they're a subset of the original 8. So there was a seeding condition where participants planted 2 trays of microgreens, a donating condition where participants donated to an environmental organization, sorting condition where participants were sorting through discarded items and placing them into their correct categories of either trash, compost, or recycling. And then a creating condition where participants created environmental posters encouraging OSU to de-invest from fossil fuels. While engaging in the PEB, they also completed 2 ecological momentary assessments, which assess their experienced affect for actually engaging in the PEB. Again, this was not at the end. This was while they were engaging in the PEB. This table shows a baseline equivalency test for those behaviors that we did to ensure that those which were randomly assigned to the condition were generally representative of the entire study population. We conducted t-tests between the 2 groups, and all of them came back as not significant, indicating that the random assignment did work and there was no skewed assignment or anything like that. An a priori analysis did determine that we needed 384 participants to achieve 0.8 power. However, we were only able to collect 131 participants for an achieved power of about 0.4. So all of the results are underpowered that I'm about to tell you, which is a good thing to keep in mind. So for H3, we did not find any association between higher environmental identity and an increase in forecast accuracy, so that hypothesis is not confirmed. H4A, we did see that a one-way ANOVA showed a significant difference between the 4 groups based on familiarity's effect on positive effective forecasts, meaning that as familiarity increases, positive effective forecasts decrease, and planned contrast revealed the differences between the sorting and seeding groups and the sorting and sign creating groups to be significantly different. So when you look at that middle column of familiarity, you'll see that sorting is the most familiar, with creating being the least familiar. And then the positive effective forecast for sorting is significantly lower than that of either the seeding or creating behaviors. So from this, we can say that H4A has some moderate support. And we think that this might be due to a lack of novelty. So as a behavior becomes more familiar, in this case, sorting your waste, you're just likely to experience and forecast less affect overall. H4B, we did not see any association between increased familiarity and increased forecast accuracy, so no findings there. And finally, familiarity did not mediate the relationship between EID and AFA, so that hypothesis was also not confirmed. So in our discussion, study 1, we saw significant and positive relationships between both EID and PAFs and EID and PEI, which was as hypothesized. We also found PAFs to be a significant mediator, significant and positive mediator, which was as expected. And again, all these hypotheses were significant within subjects, but not necessarily between group, mostly probably due to some skewed sampling that we saw. So for study 2, no significant relationship between EID and forecast accuracy, nor familiarity and forecast accuracy. We did see a significant negative relationship between familiarity and positive effective forecasts, such that as familiarity increases, positive forecasts decrease. And then we did not find familiarity to be a significant mediator between EID and AFA. But again, all these findings are underpowered by about half of what we would like to have. So we're not terribly sure on how truly true these results are. The largest practical implication for this research is in the environmental messaging domain. So in situations where environmental identity may already be high, or you might know that you're working with a population with high environmental identity, messaging promoting pro-environmental behavior engagement should attempt to elicit anticipated positive affect to increase engagement. It also may be a good idea to focus on positive anticipated emotions other than pride, as has been the case in most prior literature. In our exploratory analyses, we did find that both satisfaction and excitement significantly mediated the relationship between EID and PEI. So it could be good to focus on some other emotions as well. The mostly null findings of familiarity do indicate that people might not benefit from being reminded of their past engagement as much as we might intuitively think. And the finding that as familiarity increases, positive forecasts decrease might suggest that we might not want to focus too heavily on anticipated positive affect for those with higher familiarity. It could create some sort of rebound effect whereby people expect to feel all of this positive affect due to the messaging, but then when they actually engage in the behavior, they don't experience as much as they anticipated, which could lead to diminished engagement over time. For our limitations in future research, both studies utilize student samples, which are weird, white, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. And EID was positively skewed in both studies, probably due to the fact that we are on a college campus and we were working with college samples. So future research should attempt to use more representative samples. Study 2 was underpowered, as I said, so I think it would be wise to continue studying familiarity with a sufficient sample size to actually detect significant differences. Forecasting future affect can in turn influence experienced affect. So we tried to mitigate this by only allowing participants to sign up for part 2 of study 2 at least 3 days after they engaged in part 1. But the fact remains that the fact that they forecasted for the affects, that they could have that in their mind, so there could be some sort of priming there. But that is just the case with all effective forecasting research. And then finally, I think that we should continue to conduct some longitudinal research to see if effective forecasting errors influence future desires or decisions related to PEB engagement. So in this research, we just studied whether or not effective forecasting errors existed. We didn't study whether or not people knew that they were erroneous in their forecast or try to correct their errors or anything like that. So it could be interesting to see if programs implementing that sort of change are successful. So that's all that I have. Thank you all so much for your support over the past 2 years, and I would love to answer any questions.
Minutes for questions, and I'll suggest that the committee hold off since we'll have 90 minutes for questions after the rest of the house.
Not everyone all at once, please. Oh, Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Logan. So sorry for the noise in the background.
Oh, it's all good.
It wasn't too distracting. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the manipulations that you used and sort of specify what those were. I was just curious how those worked.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the first study, it was a manipulation from a study in 2014 in the Netherlands, so with student samples over there. And they tested it in both student and general population. They found it to work there. So we modified it a little bit. The gist of it is that for the high environmental identity manipulation, you want to remind people of their previous engagement with relatively easy pro-environmental behaviors. This is meant to kind of bolster feelings like, oh yeah, I am an environmentalist, I do all these environmental things. And the low manipulation, you try to remind people of how often they don't engage in more difficult PEBs, such as never eating meat. I always actively search for the most environmentally friendly products to make them feel like maybe they're not doing as much as they could. So that was the manipulation. Then the control, they just responded to how often they did like 6 random behaviors, like read the newspaper.
Cool. So actually, I was wondering, how do you think this would, since you think your sample was already sort of skewed towards having people with higher environmental identity, do you think that these manipulations would be more effective basically on a more sort of general sample or?
Yeah, so I think that the reason that we didn't see differences in our dependent variables was because people were just coming in with that higher environmental identity already. We didn't assess their their previous levels of environmental identity. So we're not sure what they were coming in with. But yeah, essentially, I think that with the general population, this manipulation would have worked, but because, excuse me, because of the way that the sampling worked out, we might not have done things as well as we could have.
Yeah, no, yeah, I guess that makes sense. I was thinking like if people are sort of almost anti-environmental, being on the low manipulation could sort of just really strengthen that. But I guess you'd already be capturing that anyway with a more general sample. So yeah.
That is true. Yeah. Yeah, I guess an underlying assumption is that being environmental is a good thing in this survey, which could be a limitation.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
But just not related to that, did you manipulate identity in study too, or is that an individual difference kind of measure?
Individual difference.
Was there anything go to your slide about the familiarity of the 4 behaviors?
Yes. This one?
The one that shows the actual familiarity ratings for the behaviors. Yes,
this one.
I was wondering sort of like what led you to choose those 4 behaviors, and if you think that if you saw sort of like a bigger overall spread in the familiarity score, that you would have seen sort of like a stronger effect in the actual positive effect of forecasting.
Yeah, so these behaviors were actually based on Truelove and Gillis's typology. So we tried to capture, it's like a quadrant typology for different types of pro-environmental behaviors. So we tried to capture things that were in different quadrants because, you know, one of the big issues with our research is that PEBs are treated as homogeneous when they're, for the most part, heterogeneous, that word. So they were chosen to be distinct. As you can kind of see, you know, people were most familiar with sorting. That makes sense. People recycle things all the time. People don't create environmental protest posters that often. And then the seeding and donating were pretty similar. So they were chosen specifically to hopefully be different. I think that we kind of saw that they were different as it relates to familiarity. I've forgotten what your original question was.
I was wondering if you think that you would see a sort of more of a spread in the positive affective forecasting scores if the familiarity was different. And I wonder if that might be for behaviors that aren't like one-time things. There's like what you mentioned, like I don't eat meat or something that's like continuous. Yeah,
that's a good point. I think that probably, I mean, as I mentioned, so like the more often you engage in a behavior, it kind of seems like the more or the less overall affect you experience in general. So like, you know, there's a PEV that lots of people use for a measurement is like turning off a light. But turning off a light, like you don't feel good or bad about turning off a light, like you just do it. It's not even registered for the most part, at least for me. I don't know, maybe you guys feel good about turning on and off lights. I choose not to think about it. So yeah, I think I would agree with what you're saying.
In your manipulation slide that you just have, why did you choose to ask the meat question as a double negative? And did you see like anything weird with that?
This one?
Yeah.
I never eat meat.
Yeah, I read it and I was like, hold on. So if you never don't eat meat, except like I just consider
It was reverse coded.
it was reverse coded.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just didn't know if people understood it like
Yeah.
less than I just
People might have been confused about it. You're right.
Could you speak to the donation condition? Were they donating like actual money? What was that?
Yeah, they were donating actual money, which we have not done yet, but we need to do. So it was a trivia quiz, just random trivia, and participants were able to choose from one of 8 environmental organizations to donate to. After a set of 10 questions, they did it twice. So they answered the 10 trivia questions, they chose who to donate to, and then they took the EMA.
there were some environmental.
They were all environmental, yeah. So their choices were between environmental groups. There also wasn't an option to not donate.
Time for one more question. Jeremy?
Yeah, I was wondering, can you talk a little bit, or to what degree is environmental identity sort of triggered by, or any identity, just like the social context you're in? Like, I'm assuming that in study 2, well, study 1, we have no idea because they're completing a survey, right? But in study 2, are there other people in the lab that are sort of observing the behaviors? Or if there aren't, like, how would you anticipate that having either other students or just other folks around, how do you think that affects people's perception of their identity? Just like their ability to signal, like, you know, what do you think it would strengthen their environmental identity and the linkage between performing certain behaviors and their expectation of how that would make them feel and how strong their identity is? Or I just wanted to know if you'd talk a little bit more about the social sort of dynamics there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So in this vein of research, you have what are called private sphere pro-environmental behaviors and public sphere. Public sphere tend to be a pretty, not very dependent upon, but just more dependent upon your social cues, your social context, in-group, out-group sort of stuff. You could argue that the donation and I mean, you could do any of the PEVs that we measured in the lab publicly. Participants were engaging in them privately, though. They were in their own room by themselves. So environmental identity also wasn't assessed at that lab visit. It was assessed at least 3 days prior in part 1 of the study. So there wasn't anything intentionally priming them, trying to elicit an environmental identity, if that makes sense. I think that if you were to try to do that in a group sort of setting, the research seems to be pretty clear that like social cues are very good at eliciting environmental identity if you perceive a group to be your in-group. So if it was a bunch of OSU students who were trying to make some sort of environmental decision together and trying to sway the participant to agree with them, it might be likely that they would agree with them. Does that kind of get at what you're asking?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, well, this wraps up the public portion of the seminar. So let's give Logan another round of applause. Ask the public to step out.
Thank you guys for coming.